Women are up for discussion all the time, and that's what pisses me off.
White van with white men inside it starts shouting out, "Big titty girl!"
And so people would come in for meetings and they would presume I was the person who was going to take notes or make coffees.
Hello, my name is Tanya Compass and welcome to The Wilds Retreat. Now today we're going to be talking around the injustices and inequalities faced by young women and specifically teenage girls here in the 21st century. And why we're talking about this is all because of the new show, The Wilds, which is a show around young women who've been stranded on a deserted island. The theme of this retreat is surviving inequality. And I am joined today by two incredible women, Sophie Williams, who's a leading anti-racism advocate, author of 2 books, not 1, 2. And we're also joined by Natalie Lee, who is the woman behind the Style Me Sunday blog and IG account and also body positivity advocate. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, this is a very meaty subject to get into, talking around injustices that we face as women. Obviously, sexism is something that, as women, that we all have faced, unfortunately. How do you feel like sexism has impacted you? Let's talk specifically as a black woman.
When we are, as we all, I think, identify as black women, we don't just get to exist in the world as a woman or a black person. We're always both of those things at the same time. And I think the way that most commonly impacts me, I would say, is at a systemic level.
Yeah.
Whether that is opportunities for work, whether that is how you're treated when you're in the workplace.
And what do you feel like for yourself, Natalie? Do you feel like you're impacted by sexism?
I think from a very young age, I learned that my body was a topic of discussion and my sexuality, it didn't feel like my own.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like as a woman, going from a child to a woman is a very tricky transition, and people seem to be very scared of it. Fairly recently, one of my children's teachers took me aside and said, you know, the girls are getting to that age where they're into boys and they're starting to roll up their skirts and they are starting to dress a little bit provocatively. So I've taken the girls aside and I've had a word with them. And I went, what?
Yeah.
You've taken my daughter aside and talked to her about how she should dress. That isn't your job.
Yeah.
That is not your job. And do not make my child feel ashamed of her body.
Yeah.
And what did you say to the boys? Was there any discussion with the boys about this? There's a lot of opinions. I just feel like women are up for discussion all the time. And that's what pisses me off.
It's a lot to carry as a young person. It's so much to carry. And I think that kind of leads on to the next question in terms of, have either of you been told that you have to change the way maybe you dress, you speak or you act because it's seen as being too much?
Until, I guess, my mid-20s, I wore my hair straight exclusively.
So did I.
Same.
I developed this nice new accent somehow. I went to drama school. I think there's loads of pressure. If you are any deviation from the norm, then there is a huge pressure to smooth that out. And it takes, I think, a really strong person or someone with a really strong parent guiding them to be able to be like, no, I'm not doing that.
And that's one of the things that I've challenged with my children straight away. But everywhere, you know, in books, on television, in everything around us, there's just that assumption. And I find it, now that I'm becoming more comfortable with my sexuality, my eyes are opening to the inequality of how everything is positioned and aimed at, you know, straight people. And that's very frustrating for me and something I'm really trying to challenge.
I think when you're not seen as being someone for the consumption specifically of cishet men, I think that then your experience of womanhood is then very different. Like for myself as a queer woman, and especially someone who's masculine presenting and so who wears men's clothing, it's almost like there's this idea of, oh, you're not for us anymore. But then there's still an element of like hypersexualization. Me and my partner went for like a walk when it was sunny during the summer, and you know, she got hot and she was wearing like a cute little bralette underneath, and she took it. She was like, I'm gonna take it off. She was like, oh, I don't know, and she was like, and I was like, babe, the street's empty. Take off your top. Take it off. Be free. Took it off, and I swear it was 30 seconds later, a white van started with white men inside it, started shouting out, big titty girl, da 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 da. And again, so that was racist because there were white men that were putting on a Jamaican accent and doing this like fake patois. And then it was also very sexist because it took 2 seconds. Like it was almost comical because we said about it and we're like, well, nothing's gonna happen, and it was 2 seconds, and then she put her top back on.
And how shit must she have felt after that?
After that point, she put her top back on and she felt so self-conscious.
Yeah.
You know, you grow up being told as women, you're going to be straight,
Absolutely.
you're going to be a mother, you're going to be a wife, you're going to be, all of these things are dictated to you from the moment that your gender is assigned to you at birth.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, when you deviate from any of these things, and it's just like, what do you do with this information, you know?
What box do we put you in? How do we categorise you now? How do we handle you?
We've not asked for our lives to be political. We've not asked for it to be up for discussion or debate. Yeah, it is. But I guess I want to ask you, Sophie, specifically, again, like your books are very much looking and exploring the experiences of racism, especially in the workplace. Is there any experience that have stood out to you and have impacted you whilst you've obviously been in your womanhood?
Yeah, when I became a COO, one, I looked around and there was no one like me in a position like mine. And two, people did the same and didn't know, again, what box to put me in or how to manage me. And so people would come in for meetings and they would presume I was a person who was going to take notes or make coffees or sort of do that really sort of... And there's nothing wrong with doing those roles, but that was what I was doing at the start of my career. And I'm not the most cost-effective person to do that in that meeting. It's just not... It's not what I'm there to do. You know? So when I joined the agency that I was in, I was the only non-white woman in the entire agency. By the time I left, it was 23% non-white women.
Amazing.
Not through tokenistic hiring, but just because of where can we put this spec that people wouldn't have seen it? What's it like when someone walks into this environment? What do they see? So, I guess my experience has been in people underestimating me and then in me trying to change that for the next group of people who come up behind it.
There's so much you said that literally my brain was going ding, 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 ding. There's so many times where it happened where I'd go into a school and I'm there again to deliver a workshop and they'd assume that I'm a sixth former. And I got one time I was on my phone and the teacher shouted at me. I was like, pardon? I shouted at me, get off your phone. I was like, I'm not a student.
But it's funny, only yesterday I was at a private members club and I got mistaken for being a waitress while I was there. Yeah, by two older white women. And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, oh, sorry, I just thought you'd know.
Presumed you were staff.
Yeah.
Because they think, how have you got in here too? Yeah. How are you able to get into my private members club? Yeah. And it's just you look at it and again you then start questioning, am I supposed to be here?
Yeah.
And you know, at our age now, why is that something that we're still having to question? And I think that it's so important to have women exist in so many different forms and to see people like that. There's Dr. Ronks, who is a trans non-binary doctor, dark-skinned doctor, absolutely incredible, does stuff on BBC, does stuff what is still actively working as a doctor. And their whole existence for me is just so inspiring. Like they have a phrase that they say you can't be what you do not see.
Absolutely.
And to so many young people, especially because they're on children's TV, their whole existence challenges people's perceptions around what it looks like to be a person, especially to be dark-skinned, Nigerian, gender non-conforming, trans, non-binary person that is more masculine presenting as well. In everyday life, we have to fight for joy, you know? Yeah. You have to fight for a right to just be a young person. Such a heavy load to wear. So for me, with Exist Loudly, I'm always looking at trying to create spaces where they can just be. Young people are being given the tools and the language and also being given, I think, more permission.
Yes.
Like I thought, I'm going to be a straight woman, I'm going to marry a man and da-da-da. Then I had a talk. There was somebody I met at work who became one of my best friends, and they then identified as a cis lesbian, now non-binary, but they spoke about gender and sexuality in a way that I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
When I first started talking about race, I talked about minority people, and we're not a minority. We're people who have been marginalised. So I had to have that pointed out to me, and I had to change that language and be open about that because I just hadn't thought about it in those terms before.
Yeah.
But if I'd waited until I was certain that I knew, I never would have made a start.
You're never going to know everything. And I think that so many people shy away from starting the journey of educating themselves because they think, oh, well, I'm not going to know everything and I'm always going to be wrong. And it's like, well, no. Especially when we look into how race and other things impact particularly young people in school. Again, young girls, I've recently just been diagnosed with ADHD, literally, and I'm 28. And the reason, and it's like for women, you don't get diagnosed until, I think on average I've seen was like age 35 women get diagnosed with ADHD. But when you look at it, it's even longer for black women.
Yeah.
Because you're taught, as in when you're inherently black, and some of the kind of the symptoms of having ADHD, people align to being black, you know? Oof. And I've done it, there's a group called ADHD Babes, which is a group for black women and non-binary people who have ADHD. And there's one of the people within the group shared an experience where they told their employer that they've just been diagnosed with ADHD, and they'd love to find ways that they could help make the workplace more, easier to navigate. And the employer told them, you don't have ADHD, that's just you being black.
Oof. Okay.
You know, things that you might see or hear, and like racist stuff, whatever it may be, and seeing it as, oh, it's just a word or it's just a phrase. But they hold so much power.
I think for me as a black woman, though, growing up, it comes down to the basic feeling of not being heard and not being seen. We haven't been given the space to be black, to be loud, to be proud. And that's one of the issues now, and which is amazing why the charities that you mentioned are doing work in that space that gives them that.
We've spoken about our experiences, but I think we've all also acknowledged that we are very privileged.
Yeah.
Darker skinned people have much harder times in their lives than we do, and that's not to diminish anything that any of us have experienced, but to acknowledge that we are three relatively light-skinned black people sitting and having a conversation, and we have to, I think, acknowledge and try to uplift the broadest spectrum of blackness that we can.
And I think it goes back into, I guess, with our conversation now and talking around all these experiences and looking at like the why, and looking at why are we even having this conversation? And the whole point is to kind of empower young women in particular with the language and also with the kind of knowledge to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, because I think so often we are told, like those children are told, it's you're the problem.
Yeah.
But I think what we are starting to talk about more this year, or at least something that's come into my sphere this year, has been racial gaslighting.
Yeah.
Where you experience something and people go, they didn't mean it like that, you're making it up, or it's actually you who's the problem.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can acknowledge that, the more we can say to kids, it's not you.
Yeah.
You're running uphill, and not everyone else is.
We've got some questions here actually from the audience. Do you feel like this is the time now for black women to be heard?
I think it's been the time for black women to be heard. I think we have to stop framing this as a new conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a new conversation. It's not more important now than ever, which is another thing people keep saying. It is what marginalised people, whatever that marginalisation is, have been saying for decades and for generations. They have been saying, you are killing us in the streets.
Yeah.
You're killing us in our homes. We cannot live full, safe lives where you treat us like full human beings. I hope it's time that we are heard, but what I don't want to happen and what I fear might happen is that people who have been told that this is a new conversation, I don't want them to then think that they are the voice of this conversation.
Yeah.
They are the voice that need to be heard, and so they talk over black women's voices instead of amplifying those voices.
Yeah.
So I hope so. I hope black women are going to be heard, but I'm not sure of it.
At one point, people are going to stop caring, and then it's going to take, unfortunately, another black death that is televised for suddenly people to realise that it's worth caring again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't take us people having to take videos of black death,
believe
of black
us.
pain, black violence. Just believe us. And I think that's the only. I think actually now thinking about it is, I think that's why people were paying attention this year.
Yeah.
It is.
Because of the fact that we have got the tools and we're able to create our own platforms via social media and share what's going on.
Yeah.
Whether that is here in the UK, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Nigeria with NSARS, there's so many different layers. And again, it's like, when you have a platform, how can you use it and what can you do with it? And I just hope that these conversations, again, impact change.
Yeah.
And I think this whole conversation has been us talking about, again, a lot, rehashing and reliving a lot of our own trauma, talking about other people's trauma. So I think I kind of want to end this on asking you both, I'll start with Natalie first, what brings you joy?
Oh, good question.
Great question, I know.
You know what? One thing that brings me, I'm a very tactile person, and that's something that I've been missing so much in these lockdown COVID times. So hugs, kisses, touching people, and just smiling, just living and being out in the fresh air with my family. Life.
What about you, Sophie?
I think for me, it's the sort of intentional communities that I've built around myself. I, for a long time, felt like I was out here on my own, just trying to do something. And that in trying to live out loud, in trying to exist loudly, to copy your phrase, that has drawn like-minded people to me and has allowed me to find and develop and nurture and curate an incredible group of people who are the family that I've chosen.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. And that is, I think, probably my main source of joy.
Again, just because we experience all this trauma doesn't mean that's all we should focus on.
Absolutely.
We should focus on our joy. We should create more space of joy for ourselves consistently.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I think this conversation has honestly been absolutely incredible. So I just want to say thank you to you both for coming and sitting and talking today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Wilds Retreat. Don't forget to tune into The Wilds on Amazon Prime and catch the new episodes coming out now. Thank you so much.